giggles already.
You've got the giggles already.
Probably surreptitious gin.
I'm just going to come on screen like this. Hi.
Welcome to this next session on Tuesday. Is the Tuesday the 28th of September today, in case anyone has lost track of time completely. This day has been amazing. I've absolutely loved all the sessions that we've had. Just some incredible insights, and we are in for a treat this afternoon. I hope you've seen my message in the chat and you went and poured yourself a G&T, because Carrie-Ann Wade and Lee Griffith love to have this chat on a regular basis, and they always have a G&T in their hands. I'm afraid that I only have water, because me and alcohol in the afternoon is not a good combination. And
It's like,
yeah, I feel like I need to maintain some level of professionalism this afternoon. So, but without further ado, I'd love to introduce Carrie-Ann Wade and Lee Griffith, who both have incredible amounts of experience in director roles within the NHS, in comms and engagement, and they have both founded organisations. So Carrie-Ann is founder of Cat's Pajamas, and Lee Griffith is founder of Sunday Skies, and they're both coaching and mentoring and helping leaders to make a big impact in their organisations. This afternoon, they're going to be speaking about what it takes to be a modern comms leader. And this is going to be an unfiltered conversation. You're going to feel unlocked as a leader. And I'm sure in 45 minutes, you are going to be smashing your goals and living your best life. So over to you, Carrie-Ann Wade and Lee Griffith.
Thank you very much. I caught the end of the last session and I saw the comments where they were saying, you know, wow, that's amazing. So I definitely had to take a big drink of gin before.
No pressure on us at all.
So thank you very much for having us both here this year. By way of introduction, in case you don't know us, I'm Lee Griffith. I'm the founder of Sunday Skies, which I set up at the end of last year. It's a coaching and consultancy business to help senior leaders and CEOs transform their personal impact. So you probably have all got those directors or chief execs that you work for who are a bit rubbish at the comms side, and I help them, you know, get a bit better and work with you in a better way. So before that, I worked for 20 years in provider land doing corporate comms and engagement. So that's how I met the lovely Carrie-Ann, if you want to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Lee. So again, for those who don't know me, I'm Carrie-Ann Wade, and by day I'm a Director of Communications and Engagement in the NHS, working for a mental health and community services trust across London, Essex and Kent. And in the rest of the time that I can find, I'm founder of Cat's Pajamas Communications Limited, and I pivoted my business this year to be focused on what absolutely brings me huge amounts of joy and I'm very passionate about, which is mentoring comms professionals, particularly those in management and head positions who are looking to take the next step up in their careers. So yeah, that's me.
Brilliant. So before we get underway, as ever, this is a show that we normally do over on Instagram, but we're bringing it here this afternoon. But we thought it would be wrong not to have a G&T in hand. So my first question is, what G&T have you bought, Carrie-Ann?
The first question of any episode of Take the Lead. I have a Tarquin's Cornish gin and tonic to take me back to last week when I was on holiday in Cornwall and Devon. I managed to get home with fuel. Now I have
excellent. Now you can't leave the house.
No, that's it. I'm homebound for good now. And what have you got, Lee?
Well, I have got the Aviator gin. I've got lemonade. I've gone a bit off script with mine. I've not gone gin and tonic. It's gin and lemonade because I wasn't that prepared. But we'd love to know in the comments.
4 o'clock on a Tuesday, let's be honest.
Pardon?
And because it's 4 o'clock on a Tuesday, which would not be my normal gin drinking time.
No comment. Let us know in the comments if you got the gin memo and what you're drinking, or whatever tipple of choice you've brought to today's discussion. We would love to know, and just, you know, make sure it isn't just us drinking on our own.
And up with some gin recommendations as well.
Yes.
Or if you're a non-drinker, just tea with an EA would also be good.
Absolutely. So as I said, we usually do take the lead over on Instagram. We're coming up to our 4th series now, and it basically started off as a discussion around a gin, usually after some kind of comms event that we'd been to. And when we set up our own businesses, we decided that we needed to carry on these conversations, and where best to have our rants and moans but online. So it's all about, from our perspective, sharing our experiences of leadership, busting those stereotypes and the perceptions of what it means to be a leader. I think if anyone's worked with us or knows us, we're not the kind of atypical alpha leaders that perhaps we've all come across. So, and we like to shout about the fact that we are both very different in our styles and approach as well. So, we wanted to talk today a bit more specifically about what it means to be a comms leader. Before we do that, we wanted to kick off with a quick poll to see how many people here today see themselves as a leader. So if you could put the poll up, that'd be great. And maybe if you put in the chat as well, when you first saw yourself as a leader, or at what stage you think you'll see yourself as a leader, that'd be great. There's some brilliant gin recommendations coming in as well. I love a flavoured gin.
I'm less keen on the flavoured gin, although I do love a slow gin. But I'm loving Mark saying that he's got some supply chain issues with his mushroom slow gin. Excellent.
Can we put an order in for when they're refueled, please? That'd be great.
A tanker full of it.
So while we're waiting for the kind of everyone to get their votes in on the poll, Carrie-Ann, tell me a bit about when you first considered yourself to be a leader.
So I've been reflecting on this a bit, and probably through our series of Take the Lead as well, actually. And I think for me, I didn't personally perceive myself to be a leader until I took on a head of communications role. So although I'd had manager roles and I did manage people within a team, I didn't personally feel like the rest of the organisation necessarily saw me as a leader until I took on that head of comms role. And when I thought about that, I think possibly it's because that was the point in my career where I spent more time working directly with more senior leaders in the organisation and with our board. And so I think that's kind of what made me feel like, okay, now I see myself and others see me as a leader in my organisation. I will caveat that with the fact that I became a head of comms in an organisation that I ended up working in for 6.5 years, and I had worked my way up from being an officer to a manager to a head. And we've talked about this before in other episodes, but I feel like there was a challenge in terms of positioning myself in that leadership role, because that organisation had known me in other roles beforehand. So
you were in your little pigeonhole, weren't you? And it's hard to
definitely. How about you, Lee?
I mean, I think I probably was quite hierarchical in my view of leadership when I first started in my career. So I definitely felt more like a leader the more senior I became, and perhaps the broader my portfolio became. And we probably will touch on this a bit later in the discussion. But I do think I probably saw myself as a leader in my profession and within my sector a lot sooner than I felt that within my organisation. And I think that's just because I was a one-man band for quite a long time in my career. And so getting out into other organisations, I was the most senior person representing the organisation, whereas in my organisation, I was seen as a bit of a one-man band. And I think there's also a bit around who I was comparing myself to when I was kind of coming up through the ranks. And those who were more senior to me, I perhaps saw as role models, but actually how they behaved and the kind of actions they took didn't feel natural to me. And so that made me feel a bit more of a fraud, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I know we've talked about imposter syndrome before, and we've got a whole episode on what we think about whether imposter syndrome is a thing or not. But there is a little bit of that, I think, sometimes, isn't there, where you feel a bit like, oh, I think I am, but I'm not quite sure whether I'm a leader.
So let's have a look at the results of the polls, if we can close that down and see what people have said.
So we've had 17 votes and we've had 5 not sures. So that's quite interesting. I would love to explore that a bit more. Any not surers who are brave enough to put something in the chat, I'd love to know why you've gone with a not sure. If you're brave enough to put it in the chat, but don't feel forced to.
I think there was a lot, particularly when we were doing our research, that people were saying that they didn't necessarily see themselves as a leader. It was only when other people started to position and present them as such. Yeah, it's interesting. Emma saying she feels like a leader on certain projects, but maybe not business wide. I think that can definitely be the case, and I certainly felt that at the beginning of my career. When you were brought in as an expert and you were taking the lead on something, whereas perhaps if you're coming in to support someone else, it doesn't feel exactly the same.
And sometimes that can feel like that when you work in communications in particular as well, because I think you get brought onto projects a lot because they need a comms person on the project, which is what I hear a lot of the time. And maybe your organisation is not as far advanced in their thinking around communications more strategically, which I know we will come on probably to talk a bit more about later.
Well, I was going to say that is a perfect bridge to my next kind of question, really, which is one of the things that I've heard a lot through my career, and I'm sure you have too, is that comms and communicators feel like they have a challenge to be heard at the top table. And I suppose this might be a controversial opinion, but I certainly feel that we talk a lot about this amongst ourselves and within the comms community around what needs to happen for comms to be at the top table. But I always think we're preaching to the converted.
My goodness, Lee, it's like you read my mind all of the time. So I was at a communications conference a couple of weeks ago for NHS communicators, and we had 3 chief execs talking to a room full of 200 communicators. And it was a really enlightening conversation around what chief executives feel they need from their strategic comms leaders. But the point that I made in the chat actually was, like, we know this because we are the communications professionals. Actually, we really need you to be having those conversations with other leaders like you who perhaps don't at this present moment in time perceive communications to be as important strategically. And I'm very lucky. I work for an organisation where my chief executive really values communications and is a strong advocate and a big support. But I know particularly within my field in the NHS, there are NHS organisations who don't have senior communicators working at that level. And I think it's those boards and leadership teams, that's probably the same in other industries, that really need to start having those conversations about what value communications brings to their organisation.
So what do you think really needs to happen for that shift to start to happen at the top table?
Oh gosh, well, probably some of what I've just said, which is start to have conversations in other places. So, with boards, with CEOs, with senior leadership teams, maybe with some examples from leaders who do really get it and really value communications. There is something for me which I've probably had to do myself throughout my career to date, which is really starting to understand what it is that my leadership teams and chief executives need. And sometimes they won't know. So I think you have to do a bit of exploratory work. You have to build those relationships and build that trust with those other senior leaders to understand what their priorities are and how actually you can help them from a communications point of view to deliver those, because then that's when I think you start proving your strategic worth and value, both as an individual and of course more widely for your team. But
I think that's a really important point, because we need to start doing more of the doing, because if you think about it, you don't get HR directors or finance directors going, oh, we need chief execs to come and make our case to other chief execs about why it's important. It just happens and people see that, and we almost need to stop trying to get people to fight our battles and show what it is that we are adding to the mix at a top level.
Definitely. And I think it's something that I think we talk a lot about in our profession. And I know in other industries, I think communications is probably more advanced than perhaps they are in my own industry within healthcare, but there's definitely that thing around the evaluation piece as well. I think as communicators, we're very good at problem solving. We're very good at coming in and delivering at speed, turning things around for people, but we often don't make the time or find the time to do that evaluation piece, to then present that back to the leadership teams around this is the value add. And quite often I feel like we do that, and I've got a couple of my team on here actually, so no pressure for me, but hi Lauren, hi Mandy, and Lauren, let's sort that development plan out for Lauren, who says she'll feel more like a leader when she becomes the head of or manages a bigger team. So let's make that plan. But yeah, I think there's something about sometimes when we try to demonstrate the value we add, we can sometimes get a bit caught up in kind of outputs rather than outcomes. So how many of something or how many people have engaged in something, rather than actually what's the impact of that engagement that they've had.
Yeah. And I think we position everything as comms, and I think we almost need to stop positioning it all as comms. If people have got that perception that communications is this soft and fluffy thing, if we go in as leaders and we talk about, we need to do comms on this, or we need more comms or whatever, then in their mind they're translating that to, we need to be more soft and fluffy. They're not actually seeing what it is that they need to do differently. And I suppose we have to treat the top table in the same way that we advise they talk to their staff and stakeholders. And I think we're guilty, if we were being really honest, I think we are guilty of sometimes not really thinking about how we translate the messages in a way that will mean something to them.
Yeah, and you are so right, because how often do we talk about that? How do we make that meaningful? And then maybe we're not doing ourselves a good service by not doing that. And I think somebody, Janice, has put, it's all about presenting data, and sometimes we get bogged down in the words. And I do agree,
Yeah.
there is, that balance to be had. And some of what we do, I think, will always, there'll be a side to it which is more qualitative than quantitative, but I think we should always be about, okay, how are we helping the organisation achieve its strategic objectives and priorities? And I think sometimes I've been in situations where that's been quite difficult to prove, because perhaps the organisation's not that clear on what its strategic objectives are, and you go around in a bit of a vicious circle. So like, if comms could write the narrative for that, and it's like, we kind of need you to give us a steer. So yeah, it can be quite challenging, I think, to prove our worth in a way that is meaningful to those other leaders, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be doing it.
No, but there's also something about how you, again, if I look at our esteemed colleagues in HR and finance, and how seriously, they might argue that it's not taken very seriously, but it is, in effect. It's part of recruitment. It's part of training for managers and leaders. What are they doing that perhaps comms isn't doing to get it on the table for everyone?
Yeah. I think that's a really good question. There's something for me about how often leadership teams and particularly boards see reports from those functions. So, and often also there'll be things like, we have a people and culture committee, which is very HR driven, even though the communications function in our organisation delivers a lot in terms of people and culture. The same, I guess, for finance, regular reporting in terms of their performance, what they're delivering, targets, KPIs. And it sometimes feels like, I've been in situations where it's lucky if we get to do a sort of annual report to the board, and then people are generally only interested in the good news. So how much good news have you generated, and what's all the good news stories, and less about all of the other aspects of being a good communicator and a good communications team.
Yeah. Let's just hop over to, we've had a question from Elliot. What advice would you give to those looking to position themselves into a leadership focused role, or alternatively provide more influence within the conversations which make a business-wide impact? Elliot is like, you read my mind. That was going to be practically the next question I was going to ask, Carrie-Ann.
So there's something for me about raising your own profile and the profile of your function within your organisation. And I appreciate for some organisations, your team might be a team of one, but for others there will be obviously bigger teams to be had. So for me, it's about where are the opportunities for you, not only to demonstrate the bit where you add the value, but to be the face of your organisation, to look for opportunities where you and members of your team can maybe step in and get involved in stuff that you wouldn't normally get involved in. And I think that has to be internally as well as externally. But definitely I've found for me, pushing myself outside of my comfort zone as a leader and getting involved in things outside of my organisation has always been very well supported by my chief execs and my leadership teams, because it not only raises my profile, but it raises the profile of my organisation as well. So I think there is something about trying to identify those opportunities. And I'm not sure how you're going to respond to this question, Lee, so I don't want to steal your thunder if you're going to say this as well. But so I'll say it quickly and then you might add to it, which is there's definitely something about looking outside of your own portfolio. So I think as you position yourself to become more senior within your organisations, you definitely need to have that broader understanding of other people's portfolios and what opportunities there might be for you to take other things on that might not traditionally sit within a communications function. But I'll stop waffling now, Lee, because you have something to say on that.
No, I mean, you're absolutely right with that one. I think the more you move into a more senior role, when you become a senior leader, it's about becoming a generalist. It's not about becoming more specialist. And I think that can be quite hard for us as individuals to kind of get our head around sometimes, because we've spent all this time really focusing in on our area of expertise, and then people aren't as interested in that the more senior you become, because it's a given that you've got that expertise. What they're looking is for what else you're going to bring to strengthen the whole of the organisation. So it's less about going into the weeds. Your peers aren't going to be doing that. They're not digging through the kind of tidbits of stuff. It's about how are you defining what the problems are for your teams and other people to look at what the solutions are, and bring in a bit of vision and a bit of direction, and not so much about the doing and the actions.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, and I know we might go on a bit later to talk about sort of development stuff, but sometimes as well that for some people that can be quite daunting. And I think, when you're an expert in your field, as we all are, on commsHERO Week, we're all expert communicators. It can be quite easy to talk about that with passion and feel knowledgeable and be confident. And then actually when you step into those more senior leadership roles, you then have to start talking about other things to do with strategy and the numbers. So I will put my hands up and say numbers is not my thing, but you have to learn about finance and budgets. But you have to have that broad overview, but you also have to have the confidence to have an opinion on that and voice that with certain groups of people, which I think can sometimes feel quite challenging.
Yeah, and it's I've certainly noticed that I had to broaden my portfolio the more senior I became in my organisations. It all aligned. It didn't feel like I was just kind of given all the odds and sods that no one wanted. And it actually made a much stronger function, and people took the function more seriously because I was able to present, a bigger case because of all the different bits that I would get involved in and bring it all together. So I do think that there is something that we need to do with our own mindset to think about, right, this is my goal, but how am I going to achieve it? And what else might I need to include in my development that's going to get me to that next step? Yeah. And I'd say perhaps one of the questions that I always kind of, when I'm coaching people, is to kind of ask yourself, what are you doing to connect, inspire and motivate other people towards a common objective? And I think that is, in my view, that's kind of what leadership's all about.
Yeah, absolutely. I always agree with you, Lee. What are we ever going to do one day when we disagree with each other live on a Take the Lead episode?
Well, that's when we get Sweary Mary coming out, probably.
Talk for yourself, Sweary Mary. How very dare you imply that I'm not sweary.
So when we, if you're not aware, we early this year we did a research report called The Modern Leader, which is available to download on my website and Carrie-Ann's website. And we'll give you the link at the end of the session. But one of the things that kind of came through from a lot of people that we spoke to was that there was, I suppose, consistent areas that people felt they needed to develop in from a leadership perspective. So we want to throw up a second poll to everyone to get a sense of which of these areas do you feel you need to develop in the most. We'll just wait for that to come up.
Is it multiple choice? Because I probably need to put quite a lot of them on there.
I think it's the highest.
The one that you most feel. Okay.
Yes. And also feel free to put in the chat for the area that you've picked, perhaps how supported you're feeling by your organisation or others to develop in that area at the moment. That would be quite interesting, I think, for us to understand. Whilst we're waiting for the results to come in, Carrie-Ann, what did you feel you had to develop most in your career?
Oh gosh, lots of things, but I guess having prepared for this session, I had to think about it, and there were two things that came up for me. One was around confidence, and I had that sneak preview there where we saw that was coming up a bit in the poll. Definitely, I think linked to the point I made earlier about feeling more confident in being and acting strategically within my organisation, and feeling confident that it was okay for me to have an opinion about something that wasn't necessarily to do with communications, actually. And that there is an expectation as a leader that you will have a professional view on something and you will share that and vocalize that. But I think for me, that confidence to do that felt like a really big challenge in the early days, and still sometimes does. If I feel a bit out of my depth, I just feel like, it's that kind of, I feel like I want to say something, but I'm not sure if I should. What do I know about this topic? But generally, I find my role is to ask the questions, stupid questions, of which there are no stupid questions. But that's definitely a confidence thing. And I think linked to that strategic piece, and I know we've talked about this before in other episodes as well, about what does that mean around being strategic and acting strategically. There's something for me about stepping away from the operational roles that you've had before. And you've talked about it a bit around like not getting bogged down in the weeds of things, but actually, particularly when you work for organisations where capacity and resource can be really big issues in your organisation, that you perhaps can spend too much time doing very operational things that really there should be other people in your team to do, or other people in the wider organisation to do, and therefore almost neglecting your strategic role and not making that time to step into that leadership space because you're too busy. I think because also by nature, most communicators are very helpful people as well. There is an element of always wanting to be helpful and being a yes person, but really having to set those boundaries, and also to say, my organisation pays me to be a strategic leader within the organisation. So actually, that's what, the majority of my time should be spent doing, not doing some of the other stuff that actually we should be developing other people within our teams to take on and do.
Yeah. I think mine was similar in terms of understanding more around those things that are strategically important, but I literally had no idea about. I mean, cost improvement schemes are one that just I think still make me cold when I think of
I just had a conversation about that this morning, so don't make me feel all panicky again, Lee.
But yeah, that was my other one was learning how to say no without saying no. How it's the art of guiding people through a process so that they can see for themselves that actually their idea was really stupid. But you don't want to say that.
But there are some stupid ideas. We just never tell people that.
Yeah. And I think that the art of doing that when you get more senior is it can get harder, because you, particularly with chief execs and others who think their ideas are absolutely brilliant, and the more that you try and dissuade them, the more they want to do them. So the art of getting them onto a different page is one to learn. Shall we have a look at the results of the poll?
Yes, please. Wowzers. Although I'm really pleased.
Oh, have I got to vote to see the results? Okay, that's why I'm not seeing them. I've just realised.
Sorry, Lee, I didn't know you couldn't see them. So 82% of people who voted saying confidence, self-confidence is the area they would most benefit from. I'm really pleased to see 0 votes on communications from a group of communicators.
Yes.
And of course, we're all highly emotionally intelligent. So I'm also really pleased to see that got no votes either. And then 5% of the votes, almost 6% on resilience, and almost 12% on listening.
Brilliant. So that's really interesting that confidence has come out top here, and that was the top one in our report as well that people kind of cited. I think for me, what was interesting when we did the research, and it'd be really interesting to see how people feel kind of in the room today, but they were talking about worrying that they don't have the right skills. Are they going to have to change to fit in with people, comparing themselves to other people? When we looked at what people defined leadership as, it was about being visionary, direction setting, empowering others, authenticity. And there's almost a disconnect in my mind between kind of people saying they don't feel confident. So are they saying they don't feel confident in things like setting direction and having a vision and empowering others? It'd be interesting to see what people's views are, and yours, Carrie-Ann.
Well, we've had a few comments in the chat. So somebody saying, Danielle saying, definitely confidence for me, but thanks to now working for the right company, manager and team, I'm starting to believe in myself again. And I think that's a really powerful statement, isn't it, actually? Because if you work with people whose values align with yours and who are supportive and who role model all those things you just mentioned, Lee, I think that can really help individually with you, with your confidence. And actually, if you work for an organisation that doesn't value your profession, doesn't value you personally, maybe has a bit of poor culture and bad behaviours, then that can have a massive impact on your confidence. So working for the right organisation and with the right people, I think does play a huge part in it. Yeah, absolutely. And Elliot's talking about imposter syndrome, kind of. Now, I've got a strong view on imposter syndrome, which I don't know whether we've got time to go into that today. That's a whole other episode, I know, because we've done it already.
But it's an interesting one where I think we are made to feel we're imposters, but actually there's a lot of other isms that are probably going on in an organisation that are at play to make us feel we're inferior, and actually we're not the imposter, it's other stuff that's going on in an organisation. So yes, that's a whole other topic to get going on. I won't do that. And I also think confidence is an interesting one, because I've always been accused in my career, and I don't know if you've had this, Carrie-Ann, of because I'm an introvert. And
no, you're not. I don't believe you.
I am a quiet person.
T-shirt.
But I'm someone that will sit in a meeting. I like to think through things. I don't like to get involved in a discussion unless I feel there's value to be added. And that's always been perceived by people as I'm not confident, whereas actually I know my shit, thank you very much. But I'm just not going to.
Sweary Marys come straight out. Sweary Marys come straight out. We didn't put the warning on either.
Sorry.
But yes, you do.
But you don't need to do jazz hands all the time to show that you're confident. I would back it up in the results and in other things, the execution of what is happening and in my inputs when I would feel it was necessary. But people saw confidence meaning you've got to speak up in meetings, you've got to be loud and stuff like that. So I think that's one of the things that I'm definitely keen to kind of, what's the word? Oh no, someone's kids
I love that. Sorry, we didn't put the Sweary Mary warning on.
Sorry.
And I have to say, funnily enough, as an extrovert, so the opposite of you, Lee, I do occasionally like the odd jazz hands. I have to be really honest about it. But interestingly, I have still been in situations where people where people have said I've not been assertive enough. And when I've reflected on that, I feel like it's because my style is quite different from other leaders within some of the organisations I've worked in. And we touched on it a bit before, but I have worked in organisations where the leadership teams are very much about the person who shouts loudest gets heard. You have to bang your fists on the table and poke your elbows out and, you know, throw people out of the way if you don't agree with, you know, what it is that they're saying, to get people onto your agenda. And that is absolutely not my style of leadership at all. And I think those have probably been the points in my career where my confidence has felt low and where I have been told a lot that I'm not assertive enough. Whereas flourishing, and it goes back to Danielle's point, I think flourishing under the right sort of leadership and with the right culture in your organisation means that you can feel more comfortable in your own skin, being true to your values, acting with integrity and authenticity. I don't think you should try and be a different person as a leader. You should be yourself, and actually, you know, you should hopefully be in an environment that enables you to do that, and that's what will help build your confidence and make you feel like less of an imposter if imposter syndrome is a thing. But I felt more like an imposter when I haven't been the shouty, slightly sweary, fist bangy sort of alpha female. I felt most like an imposter then, and obviously now I know I don't want to work with leadership teams like that, because it doesn't have the best for me as a leader.
And you don't have to follow what's gone before, and I think that's a really important thing, just because, you know, that's how you've seen people who are perhaps more senior and perhaps a little bit older than you, you know, that doesn't mean that's how you have to behave. And the more of us feeling more comfortable to be ourselves in a leadership position, the more that kind of mold's going to be broken. I would highly recommend to anyone, if they are interested in the whole construct of confidence and what it means, to read the Confidence Code. That was one that just really like
clicked with you,
dung all the bells for me. Yes, it was all about, you know, you can be confident. That doesn't mean you need to be the one that talks first, or, you know, you can listen, you can get other people to make points for you. There are other ways that you can influence without being the kind of brash leader. So anyway, I'm very conscious of our time.
We always do this on Any Take the Lead. Go, oh, they've got 5 minutes left.
So in our report, we talked about the 3 big things that leaders of the future need to be demonstrating, and that was values driven, prioritizing their well-being, and adaptability. So if we look at that from a comms leader point of view, how do we start to demonstrate those things?
So I think we've touched on it already throughout this conversation. So there's something about role modeling those yourself within your teams, but more widely within your organizations. So making sure that you are constantly and consistently demonstrating the values of your organization, not just in the communications that you are messaging out or the work that you're engaging people with, but in your interactions as a human being in your organization. Demonstrate those values. Be really focused on your team's well-being, and I always think we can never do enough. And again, it's about the value that you can bring and what you role model around well-being, and making that real for your own team, rather than just thinking your team is the vehicle to push the well-being messages out there and let people know what's available. Actually have those well-being conversations within your own team and support each other. And then again, you know, the same about adaptability. Be flexible, and remember, as a leader of your own team and more broadly in the organization, that, you know, one size doesn't fit all. So you might have to be adaptable. You might have your core values and your core leadership style, but you might have to be adaptable to get the best out of other people. And that should always be what you want to do, I think, as a leader. It's about bringing other people with you on that journey and getting the best out of them, rather than just telling people what you think is the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think on the values front, for me, and it's certainly something I've had to learn over my career, is that don't be afraid to challenge leadership if their behaviours aren't aligned with maybe the organisational values, but certainly if they don't align with your personal values. I think that can be really scary for you to feel like it's something you can do, and it can be really hard, and, you know, you might lose friends in the process. but I can tell you the difference it makes to you personally if you stand up for your own values. It's totally worth it in the end.
Yeah, absolutely agree, Lee. Carly's on because she's coming to chivvy us up because there'll be
no, we've got like 5 minutes left, so we can probably take a few questions if anyone has them.
Any questions? I've just realised how red I am, and that's because my husband's decided to put the heating on this afternoon, and I'm in the smallest room in the house. So,
are you sure it's not the booze?
It could be the gin as well. I don't know.
Please, can we swap partners? Because my partner won't allow me to have the heating on, and basically we've not got a hive because he basically says as soon as I see you turn it on, I'm going to turn it off again. So just put more clothes on, make a hot water bottle. So I'm liking the sound of your husband.
Brilliant. That was such a good session. Thank you. I have a couple of questions. If no one else has got any, I can't see any more in the chat. But one thing that you mentioned a couple of times was, and I think people alluded to it in the chat as well, was about not recognizing yourself as a leader until you had the job title. But do you think that when you got that job title of head of comms, did you have a moment where you were like, you knew already that you were a leader, but you were waiting for other people to affirm it, but almost you didn't want to put it out there? Or what do you think about that?
We're both looking at each other now because nobody ever asks us questions both at the same time when we do take the lead. Lee, what do you think?
I think I probably thought it was going to be grander than it was. As I say, I was very much in this hierarchical view of the more senior you become, people automatically see you as a leader. And it was actually only when I really started to think and act in a strategic way and talk more organisationally that I felt I was perceived as a leader, even though I probably went into my first head of role thinking, oh, that's it, I've made it, but actually I hadn't.
Yeah, I think I agree with Lee on that one, and I would say I think there's just something about expectations on you as you take on those more senior roles, I think. And I just, for me, although I took on that role as a head of comms, and a bit like Lee, I thought, oh yeah, that's it now, I'm like leading the team and I'm the leader and all of that kind of stuff. I still found it very hard to make that switch from being very operational in my focus to being more strategic. And so it probably took me some time. And if I'm honest, probably in my own self, in terms of confidence, didn't 100% feel like I was a strategic leader until I then moved on to my next role in a different organisation. But I think that was a bit about how I positioned myself, because I was going to a brand new organisation with an opportunity to sort of reset rather than taking on that leadership role in an organisation I'd been in for a long time. So that kind of felt easier to me to position myself as a leader when I moved into a different organisation.
Yeah. When you get to that kind of level in an organisation, do you think the responsibility to grow in leadership becomes more on your shoulders than it is on your kind of managers and peers to develop you?
For me, sorry, Lee, I'm going to jump in. That's a really interesting question, because absolutely, as managers of other people and as leaders, you should be wanting to develop and empower others to be the best versions of themselves, to push themselves outside of their comfort zones if they want to. I think you also have to accept that sometimes you will work with people who are actually just really happy where they're at and they don't want that development, and you can't be that really pushy, annoying person trying to force it on them. But personally, for me, my entire career, even before I had a career in communications, which was such a long time ago now, I can't even really remember what that was. I've always felt like it's my own responsibility to develop myself, to seek out those opportunities, to ask for them, to be a bit pushy if I need to try and seek them out. And even in other roles before I became more senior, if my organisation wasn't in a position to support me, how could I find a way to get that development for myself? So that's a bit of a tricky one to answer for me, because I'm sure there are others who have a different view of that. But I 100% feel like my own development, whether I was a comms officer or comms director is on me to really be clear about what and how I want to develop and what I need to be able to get there.
Yeah.
I would agree with Carrie-Ann. I think you have to take the responsibility. I think the difference I saw, though, was that the more senior that I got, the broader the development opportunities offered to me were. So it wasn't so much about, they were less wanting to invest when it was about my specialism. But as I was kind of broadening my portfolio, they were far more willing to invest in coaching, in leadership development, in that kind of stuff than they were in my area of expertise. And that was quite interesting. And actually, in reflection, I wish I'd pushed for some of that earlier on in my career.
Why do you think they did that? Is that something you've noticed in other organizations, or do you think that was just specific to where you were?
Certainly in the organizations I've worked, I've noticed it. I think it might have been a cultural thing at the time that the organizations were going through, which was more around how do you raise the kind of quality of leaders in an organization and help them to understand what their role is. So we kind of all benefited from that. But yeah, I don't know, Carrie-Ann.
I think probably in terms of leadership development, there's been more opportunity to do that the more senior I've been in organisations. I think because of Lee's point, which is actually the organisation generally tends to invest in a group of leaders in order to change the dynamic or the culture. So it's not necessarily been sort of an individual development thing just for me. It's been part of something wider. Whereas I think when I've been working in comms and it's about my specialism, and I even find it a bit now when I'm having to try and beg, steal and borrow money for budget for training, when it's for the team for sort of specialist communications things, that seems to hold less weight, and you do have to seem to fight for that a bit more, I'd say.
Great. Well, that was a brilliant session. Thank you both so much. How is what's the best way for people to connect with you and find your Take the Lead information?
So we are back from next Thursday, 7:30 p.m. over on my Instagram page, which is Sunday Skies UK. And you can follow us both on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, all good socials.
Brilliant. Well, thank you both so much, and I hope people do check you out. And you talked about the report that you'd written, and you said, is that on both of your websites?
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat now so people
put it in the chat. She's super organised one out of the pair of us.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. And everyone, I think you all know by now that you need to be doing the hashtag commsHERO and taking those snaps of your social lounge pictures. I was on a table earlier and we were having amazing conversations about all sorts of things. I had never met those people before, but felt like I knew them. So it was lovely. And also, as an external processor, I will be jumping on a table after this to chat to fellow external processors if there are any out there. So we would like to say thank you to Staffbase, Prezi, React and Share, Red Kite, and First Up for sponsoring this event. And we've got another great session coming up at 5:15 with Kristen Hancock from Ecology. So do stick around for that. And let's show some emoji love for Carrie-Ann and Lee. And we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.